Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting, January 7th, 2020, 6:30 p.m. at the McAuliffe Hearing Room at the Townhouse. All selectmen are present. I'll call the meeting to order. I'm going to first go to the scheduled public hearing, 6:30 p.m. Application for Class 2 license, Southborough Auto Sales, DBA Direct Auto Mall, Inc., 251 Turnpike Road. Mr. Purple.
Mr. Chairman, the legal notice, public hearing, the Southborough Board of Selectmen shall hold a public hearing on Tuesday, January 7th, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. The McAuliffe Hearing Room at the Southborough Townhouse, 17 Common Street, Southborough, Mass. To consider a Class 2 license application from Southborough Auto Tech Sales Incorporated, doing business as directautomall.com, to be located at 251 Turnpike Road in Southborough. All interested parties are encouraged to attend the Southborough Board of Selectmen.
Good. All right, so with that, I will declare the hearing open, and I understand there's a representative from Direct Auto here. If you could please have a seat and just state your name and just a little bit about yourself and your plans for.
Marcio Vasconcelos. I own Direct Auto Mall in Framingham, and this will be the second location.
Okay. Very good. Any questions from the board?
I'm just following up on I'm Marty Healy. Nice to meet you, sir.
Nice to meet you.
Just following up on some of the information you had in your packet. How long have you been in business in
20
Framingham?
years.
I'm sorry?
20 years?
All right. And is that the only location you've ever been at?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, we've been in Framingham in a couple places, but we moved about 10 years ago. We moved to the current location.
Okay. And what's just in general terms, what's your plan, inventory plan, for instance, for your operation in Southborough?
Similar to what I have over there, we sell fairly new used cars, right? So like a couple of years old. Similar operation.
How many people do you expect you'll be employing at the Southborough location?
To start, about 10 people.
Okay, great. Yeah. Well, welcome to the community. We're pretty close to Framingham.
Thank you.
All right, that's all I've got.
Okay. Mr.
Nothing, just
Kalenda.
appreciate you bringing businesses, additional businesses to Southborough.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Stivers.
A question. Are you doing any repair work at this location? Will you do repair work or just the sales work?
Yeah, repair and sales.
So when you buy a car, you repair it. It's not for public repair?
We're going to have public repair as well.
Oh, so
We
if I
intend
want
to
to
have
get my
that.
car repaired there,
Yes.
I can do that as well?
Yes,
Okay, interesting. Okay, thank you.
no problem.
Okay. Ms. Braccio.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Welcome to Southborough. I'm familiar with your Framingham operations, so
Thank you.
congratulations on coming here, and again, welcome.
Thank you.
Anyone from the public with questions, comments? With that, I will move that we close the public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of closing the public hearing?
Aye.
Aye. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we approve the application for a Class 2 license, Southborough Auto Sales, Inc., DBA Direct Auto Mall.com at 251 Turnpike Road.
Second?
Moved, seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
All right,
Thank
good
you.
luck, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good luck.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Next, appointment of Officer Michael Whalen to Police Sergeant. Mr. Purple.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Selectmen, you have in your packet this evening a recommendation from the police chief for the promotion of Officer Michael Whalen to fill the open position of sergeant with Southborough Police Department. As you know, Sergeant Richardson recently resigned from the department, and this has created an opening and a promotional opportunity, and I fully support the recommendation of the chief, and I'll turn it over to the chief.
No secret, very proud of the fine men and women here. So I just want to start off. I've had several instances over the past 6 months or so to acknowledge the officers and the hard work that they do. And I'm kind of reminded of this over the last couple of weeks. I don't know if you read our Facebook page. We've been a little bit busy. And with the holidays going by, so I've just seen the officers have to sacrifice coming in on New Year's Eve, coming in the middle of the night, getting held over from shifts, and we all know that. We accept that when the job comes along. And I was also touched tonight, Officer Whalen is gonna get sworn in by his dad, Tom, who was a police officer retiring as a sergeant in Carlisle for 29 years in 2013. And he's very proud to be here in uniform tonight. And looking at the shape he's in, I asked him if he might be looking for a job. But he said he's a little busy in retirement. So with that being said, you see a lot of the family members with Mike, including his wife Diana, who's expecting their first child. And Mike's going to get out of those overnight feedings because he's going to spend a lot of time at work overnight for the next few years. So just before I get started, I'd just like to acknowledge the families and what they go through and what they sacrifice in this profession. So I'd just like to start off by giving them a hand before we start. So I'd like to ask the board to please accept my recommendation of Officer Michael Whalen to fill the open position of Sergeant with the Southborough Police Department. The choice is of unanimous concurrence by the command staff. Officer Whalen started his career as a reserve officer with the Southborough Police Department in July of 2011, followed by his full-time appointment in April of 2012. Officer Whalen earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Criminal Justice from the University of Hartford in 2010, and he has served with the Central Mass Semlex SWAT team since 2013, where he is a valued member. I'd also like to just stop there for a second and acknowledge Mike and Officer Tom Rock, who's here. Something that maybe goes unnoticed sometimes, they're on this Central Mass Semlex SWAT team, and they train very hard and they're very good at what they do. And they have beepers, and they're often summoned in the middle of the night to go to any town in Central Mass that's having a dire emergency and needs a SWAT team right away. We're proud of their contribution. Anytime you might see it on the news, those two officers are at those locations serving the public and those departments. And certainly if we ever had a situation in Southborough, we'd be proud to call on them. So just a little side acknowledgement for them. I'll continue. Officer Whalen has received numerous letters of commendation during his career, including 2 life-saving awards in 2018 for an overdose of Narcan, and for saving an unresponsive elderly male who was not breathing by utilizing the Heimlich maneuver. As you mentioned, the position is available due to the resignation of Sergeant Aaron Richardson, who left for a position with the Mass State Police. So I'd ask you to confirm my recommendation.
Thank you very much. Any questions, comments from the board? Ms. Braccio?
Excuse me. I would just like to say congratulations. Very well deserved. I know you've done a lot of wonderful things with the department, and the town is lucky to have you and all of our police officers. And to see them all here, as well as the fire department in support of you, I think says a lot for you and your character as well. So congratulations.
Other comments?
I'll just add, Mr. Chairman, I mean, it's got to be difficult for you, Chief. You have so many qualified candidates, and a testament to you for the great work that you've done throughout your career, your educational career, your police career. You're already saving lives, and this is the safest place in Southborough right now. And anytime we have the opportunity to promote internally, I think is just an absolutely wonderful thing, and well done.
I'd just like to offer my congratulations as well, and again, thanks to everybody from the departments who've shown up as well. So with that, is there a motion?
Yeah, very easy decision. I move to approve the appointment of Officer Michael Whalen to Police Sergeant for the town of Southborough.
Second.
Moved, seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Congratulations.
To make it official, we're going to have the town clerk swear Michael in with the oath of office, and I believe his dad will be pinning his sergeant's badge on him. So if those people would come up and come right here. Mike Scanlon, come on up, please.
sergeant for the town of Southborough, according to the best of my ability and understanding, agreeing to the rules and regulations of the police department, Constitution, and the laws of the United States and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and the rules, regulations, and ordinances or bylaws of my municipal employer, and under the authority thereof, the Board of Selectmen, so help me God. Thank you. Congratulations.
Not official till he signs. Thanks to everybody for taking the time. If anybody's interested, we will have a cake for Michael downstairs, so we'll clear the room and let you get on with your
Well,
meeting.
there's one more piece.
One more piece.
Oh, all right, thank you.
Save some cake.
Congratulations again. Good job.
Are you suggesting this isn't always the safest place in Southborough?
No.
It's moments.
Yeah. Well, lately.
There may be greater risk of accident firearms.
Yeah. That was really neat.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
really classy.
Yeah, I will. All right. All right, next we're gonna go to Ms. Kesselman, Taxation Aid Committee update.
Okay,
Liz,
hi.
thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank
So you know Brian. Brian, Arthur Holmes, Jeff Klein from the assessors, and I are the current Taxation Aid Committee, which you might not be familiar with because it's been dormant for a really long time, but we've revived it. So that's why I'm here. I just wanted to bring your attention to it. Basically, it was authorized by a vote in 2002. I moved to town in 2004, so I can't really reference that directly, but what we've done in the last 6-12 months is we basically revisited what the committee is and its purpose and the application, and just kind of we've all brought it back sort of up to current. So if you're, the qualifications are, I have copies of the application, they're also on the website, but essentially if you're disabled or elderly, you've lived in town for 5 years or more, there are income qualifications, but if you meet certain criteria, we encourage folks to apply. We've made this, in the past it was kind of open, but now the time for application is the month of February, so we want to get the word out. And there was an insert in the most recent tax mailing about it. But at any rate, we want folks to apply. You can get up to $2,500 towards your Southborough property taxes. And the Globe had an article recently that was really interesting, so I printed it out knowing I was going to come here. But essentially, Massachusetts tops all states in the share of single people over 65 whose income doesn't cover basic living expenses, like food and housing and healthcare and transportation. More than 6 in 10 fall short in our state. So this is something that we can do. part of the reason we also wanted to let you know about it is because the trust for it is supported by donations. So right now, there's approximately $30,000 in the trust. So given that the word hasn't really been out and people haven't been applying, we think we're fairly comfortable, but we're really hoping that a lot of folks will apply and be eligible. And so we might want to revisit talking with you all about ways that we can make sure that this can continue.
When you say it's supported by the trust,
So the trust, so it's, I believe it's only, the only way that it can be funded is through donations, right? I think, yeah. So the donations of the past that are currently in this trust total around 30,000.
thank you.
Yeah. So donations aren't really coming in. The awareness isn't out either.
Do we seek donations actively? Do we publicize that, or not much?
So it's something that we're talking about, Sam, but we want to wait and see as we go through this sort of first session of 2020, February, like what kind of interest are we even getting and how pressing is the need? But that is on our sort of list of things to talk about. I think right now our priority was like get it revamped, get the application more user-friendly. It was a little intimidating before. We want folks to just apply and then have a conversation with them. So I think that's sort of our goal right now is like get it out there, get the word out, get folks to apply, and then hopefully we end up having to work on, okay, we're helping a lot of people, and how can we raise the donations so that we can keep it going. Brian's done really great communicating with other municipalities that have one to figure out how are they doing it and how is it working and so we're trying to network and learn more.
Do you have a link on the town's website?
We do. So the application is on the town website, and we're going to put the application up at the library, and we're going to go meet with the senior center as well, because I think that's really right. And that's it. So it's really like this first year, I think, might mostly be word of mouth before people really know.
Hi, would it be practical or even permissible to send out a slip with the real estate bills?
We did do a slip in this real estate bill.
Okay.
A number of services.
It was a flyer. A week or two ago, it had lots of different services. Youth and Family Service had a little blurb, and so it was in there.
Okay. And second, is it funded exclusively through donations because the town chose to do it that way, or because the town is obligated to do it that way?
That's a very good question.
Mostly because the town is obligated to do it that way. There's a little bit of grayness there. We did check with DOR about how we can maybe get donations from maybe businesses or other things like that. I had thought we could actually go to town meeting because it was done in another town who I won't mention because I don't think it was done right. They actually went to town meeting, did a warrant article, and got money into the trust, which I learned you can't do. So we are actually analyzing if we can go out to businesses and at least get donations from them.
Okay.
So.
And I'm probably my final question is the 5-year requirement. Is that something that we're obligated to do? No. And how did we arrive at 5 years? Is it because other towns have adopted it, or what was the process?
I think the genesis of that particular might have been me, because I think, if I remember correctly, there was, from some of our other services in town, there's a general requirement to be a resident for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And the board just thought it was a good idea. It's not required. It's not, they just thought that it should be someone that has established a little bit of longevity here.
Okay. I mean, I get that point. By the same token, if someone is actually living here, and they would be helped by tax relief, 5 years, I mean, it just seems that it might be unnecessarily arbitrary.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. We put some language in here to cover
Some flexibility?
Yes.
Yes,
So
yes.
we did that intentionally. So
There is a little blurb in there
there's
that
a
gives
little
us,
that
gives us an out,
basically gives us
sorta.
the opportunity to make exceptions to the rule.
Okay, and is that something that's spelled out in the flyer that you sent out and I didn't see?
That flyer is really, really brief. We're
Yeah.
one of maybe 8 or 10
6,
little,
Yeah.
something on veterans, so it was not specific to this.
Yeah,
and
okay.
Which
Okay.
is why I think I should probably.
But we're happy for suggestions. I
Yeah.
mean, that's a good point, and
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious, I mean, I think it's a great idea, and hopefully that your efforts will encourage more folks who are eligible to take advantage of it. And that also might be a catalyst for, if more people are taking advantage of it, but it's still not even coming close to hitting the amount of donations that are coming in, then I think it definitely would be worth revisiting. It's just my observation.
Yeah. Well, we're happy to come back at some point and let you know how we do with this first cycle.
That'd be great.
Yeah, be happy to. I'm kind of curious.
Mr. Shea, if I may?
Yes.
Thank you. What is the cutoff date in February for, you mentioned February, but you didn't give a date.
Yeah, last,
I think we put last day of the month.
it was the
28.
last day of the month, yes,
Okay.
I think it's in the packet.
yes.
Yep.
28th or 29th, isn't this the
Oh,
leap year?
there's a
It is
29
the
this
leap- I know,
month,
and
this
I
think
year.
it's-
Is
there's
it,
a 29th. Okay.
The Friday.
So, and then, Brian, just historically, maybe you know this, typically, how many people in the past, I know it's been dormant for a while, so I'm sure people haven't applied, but at one point, I'm sure that it was somewhat active. How many people took
There was-
advantage of it, or?
There was actually only one person, believe it or not, since I've been here. That's how dormant it was. It was very
Okay.
dormant.
And I would
Unfortunately.
recommend, like you said, the senior center is a great place to start, and Pam is a great outlet because she knows some of the needs of some of the seniors on a more personal level,
Okay.
that, she may have some suggestions for you as
That's our
well.
first stop, absolutely.
Thank you.
And you
Definitely
might,
agree with that. And it may not, absolutely hit the target audience, but I think it's something that we should put on our website as well.
Yeah.
And Twitter as well, just to
It's a
to
good
get it
idea.
out as best we can, get the information out, so.
you might also connect with the Youth and Family Services folks. They see a lot of folks who actually are in need of help one way or another. So that's not their prime group, but they
Right.
certainly
Yeah, good
talk to
idea.
seniors
That's
who
a good
are
idea,
looking for help.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions, comments?
Thank you.
No, thank
Great,
you.
thanks very
Thank you
much.
for the update, appreciate it.
Yeah, terrific idea.
All right, before we get into the budget, I will go back in time to public comment, if there is any public comment. Yep, if you could, either at the table here or the podium, whichever is more comfortable.
We've sort of compiled a number of emails and discussions and letters that we've sent to various boards. Wait, I might need one more for the secretary. So our little journey here, Denise Eddy, 128 Deerfoot Road, Marguerite.
Marguerite Landry, 134 Deerfoot.
So our journey began well over a few years ago when we supported Brendan Holmes putting houses on our street. We came before the Board of Selectmen with a letter that we supported his construction of those homes. And we had no problems doing so. We sent a letter in August that you have before you of our concerns of what was going on with erosion and all other things in regard to the development of those lots. We have had persistent problems. We as a neighborhood all signed this. This letter was sent to every board and was stamped at every board office. We have erosion. We have water that is coming off of the hill onto a public way, which is Deerfoot Road. We've been to planning, we've been to conservation, and we've been told that really we need to speak with the Board of Selectmen because it is a public way, and that the erosion and the silt and the water that's coming off the hill is going to a public way. Planning Board doesn't have any jurisdiction because those are A&R lots on the left-hand side of Deerfoot. As you're going down Deerfoot, those lots are on the left-hand side, so they had conservation had no issues with that because they weren't taking down more trees than necessary, In planning, because they were A&R lots, they have no jurisdiction. So our only methodology here to get some help is to talk to the Board of Selectmen. We had numerous conversations with the DPW. The problem has been identified numerous times. We were told that the plan of attack way back last spring would be that the DPW planned on putting in some catch basins on Deerfoot Road to divert the water that comes off the hill, that the tree, a very 200-year-old red oak tree that's at the bottom of my driveway on Deerfoot Road, was going to be taken out because it was necessary to do prior to the work for the drains. We were told the tree has to come down in order to put in the catch basins. Then, I believe Melissa from Conservation agreed with our findings, it's in this report, the findings that you have here, that there was a lot of erosion and silt that was landing on the street. A couple of things that were done on lot 126A, which is next to me and next to my driveway, all of the backfill was backed up to the old historic stone wall. It's not a retaining wall, it's just an old stone wall. So by taking all of that fill and substance and putting into the top of the stone wall, which it never was, all the silt is coming through the stone wall. It's coming through the stone wall in the front going onto Deerfoot Road. It's also going onto my driveway. There's so much water coming off of the hill and onto 126A, and unfortunately the homeowner who bought that property 9 weeks ago, isn't present tonight because he works within a hospital setting and I'm sure is probably in some OR. He's very distressed because the water, as it comes down off of the hill, ferrets big ruts and holes in his yard. That's how much water is coming off this hill. So if you come up there during a rainstorm, you will see the water puddled on his grass. You'll see it coming down culverts from the water coming right off the hill. So many trees have been taken down that we have no protection anymore. The root system that was nothing but root system that was there for probably 300-400 years, and now all of that's gone. The tree coming down at the bottom of the driveway is huge. Now that's been taken down. We were assured that that tree had to come down in order to make way for the drains. The drains went in, and the tree was never taken down. Then all of a sudden, the tree was coming down because it's supposedly diseased. We are actually getting an arborist because honestly, we don't want to see this happen to other trees in town because I don't believe that that tree was really diseased. The tree is so big, and I understand that we talked about this last night at planning, under 87.5, Chapter 87, Section 5, there needs to be conversation with the planning board and a vote when you take down a tree that is not diseased. But of course, under Section 5, you can take it down if in fact it's diseased and it is, present, if there's a present danger to the town or people traversing. So the trees come down. It was so big and so solid that the crane that they brought in couldn't remove the tree. The tree is still basically there. The only thing that came off were the arms. And, we also have the issue now with the stone wall. The tree has grown into the stone wall. That stone wall does need a vote of the planning board if that stone wall is going to be dismantled. That's under the law. So I guess we're here saying, can you help us out? Can you put this on the agenda? Can you ask the town department heads to explain to us why this tree came down? Because we will have another arborist report tomorrow. And if our arborist says that tree's dead, then, okay, we will obviously succumb to that decision.
It's dead now.
But we don't want any more trees taken down. We don't want the stone walls dismantled. And we certainly without input from the planning board or the Board of Selectmen, and we certainly want something done about this erosion. You cannot take water and divert it to another property. That's basically against the law. You can't do that. You can't take water from that hill and put it on my driveway. You can't take water from that hill now and deposit it on a public way, which is your responsibility as a selectman.
If I could jump in just briefly, I have slightly different concerns from Denise's. It has to do with public ways and scenic ways in Southborough and protection of the trees that are growing on these. As I understand it, there are two sets of statutes that govern what trees you can take down and when. One of them is a very old one. It was like 1913 or something like that. And it was the one that said that if a tree was, I don't have it in front of me, if a tree was to go down, Aldo wrote an opinion on this for Karen, if a tree was to go down under the old system, if I have this right, Denise, correct me if I'm wrong, it could be taken down by the DPW. Under the new system, since it's scenic ways, you need a hearing before you can take down a tree. The loophole there is under the new statute, if it's deemed a hazard, the DPW can take it down without a hearing. We feel we were denied hearings on all of the healthy trees on our street because they were deemed hazards, or they were
Just taken down.
they were, what's the word I want? They were stressed out because there'd been a drought. I would like to see that loophole dealt with in a better way, because our street is now treeless. We've been, except for one oak that's remaining that's healthy. And it seemed like there was no discussion over whether the trees had to go, aside from an arborist report that was done in April. And we wonder, if the tree was such a hazard, why did it stay up from April until December 30th when it was taken down? So what I would like to see is some energy put into redefining when the DPW can cut a tree down and who has to be part of that conversation. I would like to protect trees in other neighborhoods, even though ours are gone at this point.
And also, we would like the help of doing something about all this water that's running onto Deerfoot, and it's gonna freeze. Oh, and one of the catch basins, there is an email in here from Karen,
Last
where we
page.
spoke about the catch basin is way too high, and she said, yes, it was not put in right. So we've got a catch basin that's way up high, it's catching no water, and of course, they're going to deal with it when they repave the road, and they're not gonna repave the road until Brendan's through opening up the road, which I understand completely. But we're gonna go through a winter now with all of this freezing.
Right.
And a catch basin, which she admits was put in improperly.
So we have a couple of issues. One is the long-term, what to do about tree protection in town, and the other one is simply that there's so much water coming down that hill that it's a hazard.
And unfortunately, Planning Board doesn't have any jurisdiction, and Conservation doesn't have any jurisdiction, so we're here.
We were wondering what you could do to help
And
us out.
thought maybe you could figure some of this out. I mean, there's so much, we've done so much communication, we've tried to go to every board, we've tried to plead our case, and everybody seems to say, not our problem.
Have you gotten any response at all from the developer on this? And have you tried to reach out to him?
He was spoken to, I believe, by Conservation, where some erosion, some green things were put up, and that's about it.
Melissa
I mean,
spoke
he
to
doesn't
him,
think
yeah.
there's a problem. I spoke to him, he doesn't think there's a problem. I know the homeowner spoke to him at 126A, and he doesn't think there's a problem, but if you come in a rainstorm, you'll see there's a problem.
Mr. Kalenda?
Mr. Shea, while we can't have, back and forth on
Right.
public comment, I mean, is this something that you as chair can try to get the relevant parties together? See if there's, a meeting of the minds as to what could be done here with the DPW, with, the builder, you as our chair to try to help facilitate a resolution?
Sure.
I mean, I'd be certainly
Happy to
pleased
do
if you
it.
want to put it on agenda and we'll come back, that's not a problem, however you'd like to handle it.
Mr. Shea, if I may.
Yep.
You may want to reach out to Conservation as well. I see where Conservation has responded on some of your items, but as far as the heavy erosion, I don't see any response to that. And that falls, my understanding would be that would fall under stormwater, I would think. So maybe a conversation with Conservation as well. Again, I don't know if they're aware of all of these problems that are addressed in this August 12th.
Lisa,
Maybe they are.
Conservation did make a video of our flooding. Carl Geyer came up and did a video called, what was the name of it, Lisa? The horrible something on Deerfoot Road.
Well, it just might be helpful if we know where Conservation, where their line is as to what they can do and what they can enforce and can't. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I guess consistent with the policy or practice that there not be an extended back and forth with public comment, I would like an extended back and forth on this, just looking through the materials and listening to you. There's a ton of questions I have.
Thank you.
It strikes me that a number of the things you've identified are medium to longer term issues. As you said, a lot of the trees that you've identified or have been talking about are already down. There's nothing, fortunately, not a whole lot you can do about that. But it sounds like there might be a safety issue with the water, particularly in the winter months. And it just strikes me that that's something that, at least my view would be that we get that on the agenda, or following Mr. Calenda's suggestion, you follow up as soon as possible, because that seems to be a much more immediate issue for the folks who, I know it's a dead end, but, so it's mostly you folks who are driving on that road, but it's not a right away for an awful lot of people, but it's still potentially dangerous.
And I don't want to abuse the fact that you let us speak, because I understand that it's not on the agenda, but if you put it on the agenda, we'd be very pleased. And whenever you tell us to be here, we will, because you can see we have tried to go about this in a systematic way.
Yeah, again, even if it's not because the longer term questions you ask are the sort of thing that I'd like to get a little bit more information about, and maybe that can't be done by January 21st, but the more immediate concerns, it just strikes me as something that we should try to address.
You got delivery
ASAP.
trucks. Yeah, delivery trucks going up and down
Yeah.
the road, which is an issue. Mr. Shea, could I make one more request
Yep.
in terms of your next step in the process?
Yes.
I heard a lot of this last night at the planning board meeting and did a little looking at it. I think there's an interesting issue relative to the state law on this. I know town council wrote an opinion about it. The Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 15C, that was referred to for the scenic roads. It turns out all the roads, almost all the roads except for state roads in Southborough, are scenic roads designated according to town council. That particular bylaw actually requires planning board approval for removal of trees. It doesn't say anything about diseased trees or healthy trees or whatever. And so it's unclear to me how the law works. I think it'd be very helpful to get town council's opinion and to help sort that out and possibly come up, as was suggested here, with sort of a cheat sheet to say, here's what happens with trees, whether they're on town property, private property, scenic ways, what can utility companies do, et cetera. All that is, I think, reasonably well known. It'd be very helpful to have that clarified for everybody involved going forward, in addition to some of the issues here. And I think it's also a good example of where occasionally, even though people are trying to do the right thing, there are things that slip between the cracks. And it seems to me that there's interesting conversation to be had as a next step to talk about, are there ways to maybe create an ombudsman function somewhere to be able to resolve some of these things and get the right people together to solve them without us or other people having to get involved between the various departments here. So I would urge you to consider that possibility as well, and I would be eager to continue the conversation in more detail at a next meeting with an agenda item. Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Stiver's point, given the issues that have been raised and everything, I've already reached out to council to ask him for clarification based on his 2016 opinion. And
Good.
looking at the application in this instance, just to try to understand, let's all get on the same page and understand from council's perspective how this should be interpreted and what is and shouldn't be. So hopefully that'll be back in the very near future, and I can make sure that is shared.
All right. And again, just so I'm clear, I understand a number of trees have come down. The town, as I understand, took down that one tree. Is that true, or was it the town or the developer that took down
There
the
was
trees?
that tree, and then when the development first started last year, there was another oak that came down that was definitely a town tree, because it was on this side of the wall next to the road, and then there was a pine tree that was there. Is that right? Were there any more?
There were two trees that
There were two big healthy trees that came down,
and there was no notification.
nothing.
It was the town that took those down?
Correct,
Was it the town, or was it, was Brendan? It was the town.
was the town. So we were feeling a bit blindsided by this whole thing. I mean, it's like,
And I guess the other thing is the mere fact that it was explained to the neighborhood, it was explained to us that the first reason the tree had to come down,
big tree.
the big tree, was in order to put in the drain system. And then all of a sudden, the drains were put in, and now the tree's coming down. And we sent an email asking this doesn't make any sense, and it was, well, the tree is diseased, and it just makes it easier to put the drains in, but the drains are already in. So why are we taking the tree down, you know? And see, that tree, I believe, the root system on that tree is helping to keep a lot of that water back that we're not getting yet. And as soon as that comes out, I think we're gonna have even more water. It's gonna be tremendous. But once that comes out, because they got so far that they couldn't remove the whole thing, it was too big. So they have to bring in a bigger crane to get it out of there. So they stopped. So it's still probably, what, 20 feet in the air? At least, if not more. So they really just took the branches off. So now, we're all concerned about what happens when the rest of that tree comes out.
Right.
The wall is going to somehow be decimated because the tree's grown into the wall. The wall is your domain, or the planning board's domain. And, you know, once those roots are disturbed, it's a big tree, trust me. We have a lot more water. So whenever you tell us to be present or whatever, we shall.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mark, will you get a hold of us and tell us? Thank you.
Absolutely will, thank you.
Perfect, you have my email, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks
very
very
much
much.
for hearing us.
Any other public comment?
Hi, Lisa Dunderdale, 122 Deerfoot Road.
Again, if you could be at the microphone, please.
I had a question. I don't know if you can, maybe you can't answer it because there's no back and forth. But last weekend we were at the transfer station. We were collecting signatures for a noise bylaw, which I think is very important to have here in the town of Southborough. And we're definitely well over 10. We're probably closer to 75 signatures. And with that, I would have to say that many of our residents are interested in having a noise bylaw here in Southborough. If we get, so I went back and I listened to the 1217 board meeting, and I wasn't sure if I heard that if we get to 100 signatures, that the Board of Selectmen would have a public meeting to discuss the proposed bylaw. Is that the case?
So what that would do, if, with the appropriate number of signatures, that would allow a citizen petition warrant article to be included in the warrant for
Yep.
the annual town meeting. So that could be voted and acted on by the town at the town meeting. Now, there isn't currently, unless you presented a version of the noise bylaw that people signed as they signed the petition, there isn't currently a noise bylaw in place. Our
Correct.
discussion on the 17th was whether the board wanted to sponsor an article. And
Right.
and the vote was not to have the board sponsor an article.
Right.
So, if you have the signatures for a citizen petition article and
Yep.
you have noise bylaw language to accompany that, then that could be presented and submitted to Mr. Purple and I think the town clerk,
Town clerk.
Get it?
To the selectman's office.
Yeah.
Selectman's office and the selectman will provide it to the town clerk. They certify the signatures, give it back to us and say that they've certified the appropriate number of signatures, and then it's placed on the warrant.
All you need is 10, though, for a
That's
citizen
correct.
petition for annual
For
town meeting.
for an annual town
Yeah.
meeting, it's only 10 signatures.
Right. And so my question was, we would love to have a conversation about this bylaw and get the residents involved with, questions so they can understand what's in the bylaw before a town meeting. And I wasn't sure if that was something that we could request of the Board of Selectmen.
And I think, Mr. Chairman, so I think you can always ask something be put on an agenda
Okay.
for, that can be discussed,
Okay.
unlike in a public comment way, but in an agenda item. And then secondly, I think if memory serves, we weren't ready to sponsor something ourselves, but it's something that we wanted to look at this year and get input. I think the police chief had a draft. I think there was another draft that was out there. It was just, if memory served, it was something that we wanted to really put the time into to ensure that we then had it right and then be able to present it at possibly as a board-sponsored article at a subsequent town meeting, but we weren't ready to do it for this one. So that's another avenue.
Gotcha.
But the other avenue is if any citizen wants to draft one up.
Yep.
And have the petition signed in support of that and submit it, then they could try that at town meeting too.
Okay, great. So if we wanted to have it placed on an agenda meeting and invite the public to come in and discuss it, that's something
You'd have
that
to
we
work
could
through
do?
the chair, and he'd have to place it on if
Okay.
he
Yeah, I
was
mean,
able
So
at
we
to.
would
this
need to
point,
talk to
so,
you,
I mean, respectful, so the vote of our board was not to proceed with it for this upcoming town meeting in March.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha,
right? And
yep.
I think that we have a full plate ahead of us getting ready for town meeting
Okay.
in March. So finding the time to get it done in the short term
Mhm.
with this board, I think is gonna be a challenge. But that's not to say that others can't act outside of this board to advance something much
Okay.
sooner.
Great.
So,
But if there's a citizen petition filed with the right number of signatures, then at some point, we in the advisory committee
Mhm.
will discuss all the warrant articles
we'll,
and have an opportunity for
Correct.
people to at least listen and maybe participate in that potentially.
correct.
Great.
But again, we would only be acting on that
Right.
which is
Proposed,
submitted
yeah.
word by word. We're not allowed to take it, modify it, tweak it, et cetera.
Gotcha.
So,
But
if
th-
it's a
things
citizen
But things
petition.
could happen at the meeting, but it's certainly a great opportunity to have a discussion prior to, so the residents have an understanding of what it all means. So,
And
great.
while we can't modify it,
No.
the proposer actually could modify, based on comments that you receive between now and town meeting. You would have the option to make edits, changes, et cetera, there, that we couldn't do. We're not the sponsors, you would be
Right.
the sponsor.
So that can happen even after submitting the
Yeah,
petition?
Yeah, before it goes to town meeting, I think.
And
Is
so
that
it
not
can
correct?
happen.
No,
It
so
happened
what,
at-
yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead,
At
Mr.
town
Probst.
meeting.
I'm sorry, so with the citizen petition, it
Mhm.
basically gets submitted as you submit it.
Yep.
No one makes any changes to it, it goes in the warrant as is
As is.
printed as is, and then once you get to the floor of town meeting,
Suggestions
you
can be
can
made?
do, you can, motions can happen and everything. The one suggestion that I will offer
Mhm.
is the language at the end of the article
Mhm.
and any other, what she said. So, but basically, that little language at the end of it allows you to change the article.
Okay.
Because there have been times where that language has been omitted from a citizen petition article, and the article is basically voted up or down.
Okay.
As it is printed, you can't make any changes to it, it is what it is. So as
Okay.
long as you make sure that is in there, then those discussions at town meeting that we're, talking about now can happen, and the article can be amended if people feel that there's something that they, is more amenable to the town meeting to pass.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for your
Lisa.
suggestions.
Thank you. Any other public comment? All right, we will move on to continued discussion of the FY 2021 budget. Brian Jones.
Yes.
Mr.
Yes,
Valentine.
So Mr. Valentine is coming up, and you have in your packets some additional information from the last time we got together, which gives you, I think, a new perspective on the budget document, but also provides you some information which Mr. Valentine will go through to kind of, again, just kind of give you some perspective on not only what the budget means to fiscal '21 next year, but what it also is looking at, what it means for the next several years down the road. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Valentine.
Thank you. Fortunately, this is an uplifting conversation, but a necessary one. So the purpose of tonight is probably twofold, and I believe. Initially, we wanted support for, or at least thoughts on a budget that the town administrator and myself compiled after our last meeting. Although we would still like that tonight, at least in concept, some type of support or thoughts on maybe our version or a version the board would like to undertake. We still have, obviously, some areas that, and I may have mentioned these before, that are undetermined as of tonight, such as health insurance. The schools are still knocking on their number a little bit, and some other areas. So no matter what we did tonight, it would be a draft budget. It's not going to change until at least a couple weeks ahead for a number of reasons. But the other issue that is probably more important, I think, is looking ahead, and you've all seen the estimate of 5 years based on our current capital, that unfortunately has a lot of red in it after FY '21. The red meaning that we're up against the levy or over the levy, exactly. That's problematic. So I would really think, no matter what happens and how good the numbers come out the rest of this year, we're gonna have tough years after FY '21. We're gonna be right up against the levy, or that's gonna be an issue at some point. The town administrator and myself have spoken about this. I think we're in agreement that it would be good for the board to let department heads know as soon as possible that we've had a good run the last 3 or 4 years financially, fairly good, pretty good atmosphere. I think that's coming to a close, and we have a lot of new department heads that I have not been through this before. Unfortunately, I have a couple times. Some people on the board also have been through this a couple times. So the earlier we can tell them, the board, from our FY '21, at least for that year, and maybe for a couple years, supports level service budgets only, I think, better. It'll set the stage where department heads know that we've increased services in a number of areas, which we've been fortunate enough to do, but I think they need to know that ahead of time for next year, that won't be the case then. Nothing's going to be changed between the next year that's going to change that challenge over the next 5 years. So it is what it is. But hopefully the board agrees with the town administrator and myself and would support that stance for next year. This year is a little different. FY '21, in the version that we gave you that the town administrator and myself put together, we've used about $400,000 in levy capacity, and we've got it from a mid 5% increase to a 4.4% increase. And theoretically, if that stayed right now, again, it would probably go lower. I think all the changes that hoping all the changes that come from here on out in the next 2 to 4 weeks are lower. Not millions of dollars lower, but maybe a couple of $100,000 lower, which would really help this number. We're shooting to try to get in the 3s, but can't guarantee that. May or may not happen. So that's kind of where I think we are. As far as why we go into the red the next few years, I will touch on that. A lot of it's for capital reasons. We still have a lot of projects out there that on the board officially that we want to look into. They haven't been vetted yet, but we obviously have to plan them. There's a big Corderville Road project the DPW would like to propose, transfer station improvements. There's some HVAC maintenance we need to do to Town Hall, various building projects that are out there that are going to affect the next few years. And despite the public safety building, which is great, and that it'll slowly start declining, that's only going to partially offset all these projects that are on the board. So if you put all that together, you can see how the next couple of years our capital maintenance and bonding commitments are high enough that where it trips us over into some trouble with the levy limit. So.
Can I just ask a
Yes.
clarifying question about that? Brian, the number then, obviously looking at, I'm looking, there's not a page number on it, but it's the
3,
Yeah.
summary, yes.
I mean, there are increases, obviously, looking at the historical from FY '18 to '19 to '20 to '21. There's a more sizable increase. It's the largest one on the table is from FY '21 to FY '22. That's in terms of total expenditures.
Yes.
Now, is that the capital projects, potential capital projects that you mentioned? Are those baked into that number
Yes.
already?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Now, some of that is the public safety building, because we do have that last piece I've mentioned before. So part of that is that, although remember that doesn't affect the levy limit, it does affect the tax increases. But the majority of that is some of these newer projects that are on the board that would probably hit in FY '21. A little bit of it is regular capital, but actually that doesn't change much from '21 to '22, I believe. But we do, so most of it is those larger projects that we are going to be talking about.
Does a roster of those, obviously it must exist in
Yes.
some form.
Yes,
All right.
there is a
I guess
roster.
that's something I'd like to see as soon as possible.
Sure. Sure.
And and you mentioned in terms of there's not anything we can do to reverse that or stem that. Well, to some extent, an easy answer to that is you could not do the capital projects.
Correct.
Or reduce them, yeah.
Correct. There's ways to massage it.
That's kind of how we got here, by deferring capital.
No, I understand,
no.
but I'm just
Yeah.
trying to figure out where the,
With the bonding,
That's the easy answer.
I'm sorry.
okay, all right.
So there's a couple things. So the regular capital, yes, you either put it off, you don't do it, or you say it's not worthy, we're not gonna do it. But with the bonding, you can sort of massage it, because you have terms you can go out. 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. You can actually determine when you start it, if you want to. It doesn't really benefit you too much to delay it. You can. But that's why this $500,000 on that sheet that you're looking at in FY '22, if we had to, we could probably eliminate that just by moving around the capital. Not eliminating it, just moving around the bonding part of it a little bit. And it-
That's looking at the best case scenario, the
Yes,
500,000?
yes,
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess your answer is there's ways to sort of fiddle with the schedule a little bit, but you're sort of in a box that you have some movement, but not a lot.
Okay.
But we could also do things like, for example, one of the projects is the transfer station. Last I heard is about $3.5 million. You could
Right.
actually build that into transfer station fees and fund it differently, so that's effectively a tax increase for the users of the transfer station. But again, you can move money from one pile to another like that in some places here. Brian, also, in the past, I'd heard that the school debt was going to roll off substantially in like FY '23 or so, and I'm assuming all that stuff is in there, but I was hoping for a little more impact, so that didn't make a significant impact on this, right?
Correct.
Disappointing. Has
You're right.
advisory looked at this? Have you talked about
The
this with
grant,
advisory?
and just to add on that, the grant actually ends at the same time,
Oh,
where before
okay.
there was off years.
Yep,
This actually, the end of this project actually is mirrored.
right there.
So that's why it's sort of, because the revenue's not coming in anymore either.
Yeah, okay.
So you kind of, yeah. I'm sorry, what was the
Has
fault?
advisory actually looked at this and discussed this with them, so they're on board with these
So the
numbers
town
at this point?
administrator can add to my comment, but the advisory is, as I understand it, is currently, well, they're currently in the process of still at the department level looking at it, although I know the chair has reviewed higher versions, and I think has suggested, the chair may suggest yet another version from advisory's point of view, so I haven't seen that yet,
Okay.
and I don't know
Still
what that
working.
comprises.
Okay.
Yes, still working,
Okay,
yes.
thanks.
And the best case scenario, the way you've broken this down, Brian and Mark, is no reductions, and that essentially is the budget we looked at on the 17th? There was
No,
a-
that's the budget that you have attached in your packet, which is now a 4.4% increase rather than a 5.6, Brian?
Yes.
Original
Okay.
was 5.6, yes, so.
And the draft TA recommendation, that would take it down below 4?
That would take it down to a 4.4, and what we're saying with the best-case scenario is, if health insurance comes down, our experience rating is very good, we're working on the final numbers with the health advisor. If our increases come down where we expect they will, if the school increases for K-8 and the Algonquin assessment come in where we think they will, again, we're getting a great benefit from the enrollment numbers. Northborough's carrying all the kids, we're getting the benefit of that in the assessment. If meals tax comes through, and we get 9 months' worth of meals tax next year, and that's approved at town meeting, and if, local receipts, I'm not sure what changes we would see with that, but as long as those stay pretty consistent, that's kind of that best-case scenario.
Just so I'm clear, because I'm not right now. So in our packet,
Yes.
there's the recap that shows a 4.46 4.46% increase.
Correct,
And that is taking into account the recommendations
correct.
plus the best-case scenarios.
So this is, so what you have in your packets for this estimated recap of the 446 is the second one, the draft TA recommendation.
Okay, so.
Where
so-
we stand today,
Okay,
this is
so-
where we hope we'll finish,
So I think,
at the bottom.
Marty, you had asked this, the top row, the no reductions as requested, that's reflective of the
That's the
budget
full
that was
enchilada that
presented
everybody
at
get-
on the
correct.
17th.
Okay,
Right.
All right,
all right.
all right.
Mr. Shea, if I may?
Yep.
Just, first I want to thank Mark and Brian. I know you guys have put a lot of time and effort in, based on the comments and the feedback from our last meeting. So, thank you for putting this together. But I think there's a bigger problem here in sustainability. We can't continue to tax an additional 4.46 a year with revenues only increasing $450,000. I think we need to look at some better long-range forecasting, to look at what's coming down the road, what infrastructure issues we will be having to address, instead of putting things off and ending up with needing $1 million to fix a roof, $300,000 for siding, or even looking at Neary, which is, I think it's 56 or 57 years old today. So Neary is going to be something that's going to be on the horizon as well, that we're going to need to look at and decide what we want to do with that. But I don't think we can continue spending at this rate. I don't think it's fiscally responsible. I tried to equate this, I spent a lot of time thinking about this, and if we were to equate this to a private sector company with a projected revenue of only $450,000 increase, there'd be a hiring freeze, they'd be looking at cuts. And I understand we're not about profit, but we should be looking at how to increase the budget responsibly for our taxpayers. My opinion, Brian, can you just touch on the debt service for next year? Did I miss that you kind of touched on that? The debt service for the public safety?
Yes, so, the debt service, for next year, FY '21, correct? So the public safety, actually in '21, it's not, there's not much change.
It's 22.
22.
It's
Right,
22.
it's like
It's
a million.
22.
It's 22, where the public safety's probably about 300,000, and there's probably 700,000 or 800,000 of other stuff that is, like I said, the Corderville Road project, the transfer station, townhouse stuff, some other stuff that's in there.
Okay.
That's really the
And I know,
problem.
I know we have needs, and I know that there's services in the town that people expect and people need, but at some point in next year, when we're having this conversation, I think we're already looking at being in the red. So I think we need to take a look at this year and see what we can do this year that may have a more positive effect on what we know is going to be bad for next year. So just my opinion, I think there's further things that we should look at to potentially cut. Thank you.
Mr. Purple.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, so just one other thing to put it in context, is I think when you take a look at, what Brian has prepared in terms of, where we're going and how quickly we're going to get there, you could look at this and say, well, look, I mean, how many millions do we usually start in the hole? And then we bring everything in and everything's great and, and everything works out. So in fiscal '22, best case scenario, $500,000, that's nothing. The difference with these deficits is that we no longer have the levy capacity to simply address them with unused levy capacity. We don't have, all that is gone. We now have the 2.5 increase and any new growth. And again, we have not had a lot of building in this town since 2014. And so we've had no big projects, we've had no new growth. So again, we're gonna be up against, the levy limit. And, Brian may say it makes budgeting a lot easier, simply because this is all we've got for revenue.
But what are we looking at? At what point, you guys have worked very hard to get the bond rating that we have. At what point are we potentially putting that in some form of jeopardy?
Fiscal '22.
22.
Easily. So
Okay.
fiscal '22, when we have no levy capacity left, because again, one of the components of the bond rating, and I know some people disagree with that, but one of the components of bond rating is savings. And we do not have a large stabilization fund. We don't have, big savings account. Southborough generally has not believed in putting money aside. They've been very generous in paying for things as we go, as we need them. However, we made an argument to the bond rating company when we had our last review to go to a AAA and said, look, we've got almost $3 million in excess levy capacity. That's considered savings, and they agreed with us. So when that's gone, we've lost that argument, and I think it'd be much more difficult to hold on to the AAA. Do I want to lose the AAA? Absolutely not. Did we get the AAA when we needed it and save hundreds of thousands of dollars in the most important and largest project that the town's ever done, and really got it and was able to use it for what we needed it? Sure. Again, do I want to lose it? No. I don't think, we want to have that, it's great to get it, it's not great to lose it.
Thank you.
Other comments?
Brian, last time we spoke, I inquired, and maybe you have answers since we last spoke, about things that have been the same for years. I can go through all of them again, but moderator, $75. I mean, did you look at all those things that we had talked about last time, and or not yet?
Not yet, I will.
I would appreciate that.
Yeah, some of them go back to,
So,
you're right, they're ancient.
and I'll come back to, and I'm gonna keep talking about this one. Why is open space in there for $2,000 when historically they've been in there for $1,500? Just like selectmen salaries and moderators, numbers have been the same for years. That one went up last year because of the extra seminar they wanted to go to. Are they going to seminars every year now, or what? I asked, and I'll ask again, that should be reduced to $1,500. It's a small amount, but and Selectman Braccio may not agree with me on this particular piece, but I agree with you completely on, we gotta look at this, all of this. And why is it just a given that one is again at $2,000? Can you answer that?
I think, part of it is we never met with the committee.
Okay, so I'll suggest that tonight,
We can meet with them,
if you
though.
want to disagree,
and-
that one be reduced back to where it was, which is $1,500.
I would disagree with that with Ms. Braccio also, but
All right, so
a
we have.
topic for
we have
discussion.
2 for 1 so far, gentlemen. Do you want to continue to fund the birds and the continued analysis of mosquitoes, frogs, and butterflies? I didn't notice any difference in the number of mosquitoes last year, and I haven't seen one bit of evidence that whatever seminar they went to last year had any amazing positive benefit for the town of Southborough. Now, maybe I'm completely incorrect on that, but, is it the exact same seminar this year? What is the seminar? What's the amazing benefit to the town? It's $1,500 for years, and suddenly it jumps up $500 last year. And if we're gonna do that, then you know what? We need to look at every single one of these, and I would like to have anyone who is taking classes, all right? Are those classes a benefit to the town? Demonstrate that they are, and then we could start with open space. I'd love to know about what they learned for the $500, and if they're gonna learn that same thing for $500 every year. I lost the battle last year where Youth and Family Services should have received that $500. People on this board thought that, training by open space members on, and I think I have this correct, butterflies, frogs, and mosquitoes was more important than Youth and Family Services. I wholeheartedly disagree, and so far it sounds like at least one, maybe 2, continue to disagree with me on that. I would like to know what you gentlemen think.
If I may just add.
I just wanted to point out one factual piece, is that Youth and Family Services were the only ones that received anything new last year.
Right, and this year they.
Yeah, they did not
received
not receive what they wanted, and they thought that they needed.
Mr. Glenn, I didn't say that. So I wanted to point out that, like I said, last year they were the only ones that received anything, but I understand that they have a multi-year plan that they're looking at too.
I will just add, I don't think we should be pitting boards, commissions, committees together. I agree, if we want to take a look at, I'd be happy to. I go through the budget detail by detail. I'd be happy to have everybody come in and have them make us understand what it is that we want. I mean, I disagree with you on open space respectfully. I mean, I think the letter that we just received from St. Mark's was a clear factor of that. But again, I don't disagree that that's what we should be doing at this point. We should be looking at every single line item in this budget and figuring out where and what we can do to benefit the taxpayers.
That's all I'm saying. I don't have the justification yet to keep it at $200,000, $2,000 every year forever now. That was last year for one seminar that a few people wanted to go to. I have no idea how it went or what benefit there is to the town for that. I strongly suggest that it go back to what it was, unless there's a demonstrable need where that should continue to be now at a $2,000 mark. That's all I'm saying. I support him, and I support the 1,500. I don't support the 2,000.
We could respectfully disagree on that, Dan.
Let's hear what they have to say. Yeah.
I've got a somewhat larger question.
That question was large.
No, I know, but mine is more than 500.
Larger dollar
Mine's
question.
more principled, but that's good.
Back in the day, when I did a pretty lengthy tenure on advisory, one of the, it didn't have to be a complete budget, although sometimes it was, but at least one of the budget summaries that we did was one that did not show any red at all. And that served two purposes. Number one, it showed us that it could be done, and it always can be done. But it didn't just show us that it could be done. It also showed both the departments and the taxpayers what it would take to get it done. And the three we have right now, the no reductions, the draft reduction, and the best case scenario, incredibly helpful information, and appreciate that. I am very uncomfortable, even forget about fiscal year 2022. I'm very uncomfortable even thinking about fiscal year 2021 to adopt a budget that has red just over the horizon. That's a very scary proposition. And I know, and Mr. Purple, you said it's not complete disagreement about whether or not we should have had larger reserves, but I lost that argument 15 or 20 years ago. And so as a result, we don't have a cushion like we did at least one of the last times this happened. And so we don't have a cushion, we don't have levy capacity, and we've got a spreadsheet that's an awful lot of work has gone into that there's a lot of red on, not very far away. And so I think it's important to try to get to at least what a budget would look like. I really would like to see it that would get rid of that red. And if that means thinking about some of the capital projects and taking them out and deciding that we kick the can down the road, and regrettably having done that, we have to kick it down some more. If that means looking at some, the phrase used was hiring freeze, we do have some new positions and new hours in this budget. With red sitting there, that's hard for me to justify. And so I guess what I would like to see, again, it would inform me, but I think it's also important for the department heads and the taxpayers to see what a level funded, what a budget without deficits and without a levy deficit would look like. I think that's really important.
So you mean no levy deficit for 5 years?
Correct.
Okay, all right.
Correct.
So I got a question on capital then, Mr. Ballantyne. I mean, are you and others who are looking at the capital expenses doing it without any real analysis? Are these actual dates that you know that equipment is coming due? I mean, I think one of the most irresponsible things we could do is just put it off to the next fiscal year, the next set of taxpayers, the next, and then boom, they get nailed because we kicked that can down the road. thought, yeah, we want to make it look better now, and we don't want to see what's around the corner. Let's just keep, and then, you know, buildings don't last forever, equipment doesn't last forever.
Right.
I think if you have a disciplined and, you know, capital plan that was put together with reason and, you know, good analytics, you stick to it. You don't continue to, you don't play with it. Now, maybe there's some reason where, you know, hey, this equipment needs to be replaced within 8 to 10 years, and you go to the 10-year window. You know, I can get another year. You know, at some point, stop and replace things when they need to be replaced. I think you know, I'm not very good at that myself. All right, I keep things longer than I should, and then I end up paying for it someday. I don't want to see us play the game when we know that a good capital plan is in place, and you inform the taxpayers of it every year. Here's what's coming, so they know. I think the residents in the town of Southborough will fund things. I think if we do our job, advisory, you know, they do a great job. And with you, and you put together this plan, you put together our budgets, you know, I've been to plenty of town meetings, and budgets pass overwhelmingly every single year. It will happen again this year, the next year, the year after, the year after. You know, not that there's no limit, and I think we do a great job in making sure that whatever budget we put together is a pretty sound and very fiscally sound budget. I think I just would be very careful about hiding stuff behind a window, behind a curtain. You know, we'll get to it another time. Don't look behind there. You know, no, people are old enough, they pay bills, tell them, this is what's coming, and I think they'll fund it. Just like I think if we want to, as I do, fully fund youth and family services, personal protection, or police and fire professionals, that they want and need additional resources, you know what? The good people in the town of Southborough will overwhelmingly support our public safety officials, and you know, you be open with them about what the need is and where we're at today, where we're at 5 years from now. People are gonna be supportive. That's my thought.
To Mr. Kalenda's point, Brian, in terms of projecting on the capital side particularly, I think that it sort of takes care of itself if you do it right, in the sense that if we don't, let's say, replace this truck this year, we do it next year. In fact, it's likely maintenance cost is going to go up the next year.
That's correct.
So if you build those future projections for additional costs, or we're not going to fix the roof this year, we're going to have to spend $100,000 fixing it every year from now on out. If you do that correctly, you will see that it doesn't pay to actually kick the can down the road on those kind of things often, and give you, I think, a clearer picture of some of the trade-offs as far as do we do it now or do we wait? So I would urge you to.
So Mr. Stivers jumped in and pretty much said what I was gonna say, is that, you know, I think this finance team has done a nice job of putting together replacement schedules. You know, Brian has been here long enough, he can probably remember a time when the maintenance budgets are pretty high and the equipment was in less than great condition. We've done a nice job of getting rid of and reducing significantly those maintenance budgets because we replaced the equipment timely. You notice that we have hundreds of thousands of dollars in improvements to the library that are included in this capital plan. That stuff has been pushed down the road for 2 or 3 years now. And, you know, when we've talked about consequences of doing that, it helps this year, it's a feel-good for this year, but it's gonna be sitting there again next year. And do we try to do it, or do we move it down the road as something else comes in, or something else, you know, happens? So, you know, I do agree that, you know, if we've got a good maintenance plan, you know, we should try to the best we can stick to it. But to Brian's point that he made, you've got some larger capital items that we've put in there, you know, as placeholders. And I think those are the ones that, you know, addressing those is good. Can those items be pushed a little bit? You know, maybe, but again, you know, I think it's better for us to work on those and refine those numbers so we actually know what that impact is as that, you know, carries across.
Well said, Mr. Purple, and once again, I agree with Mr. Stivers. Solid point. All right, so we also have to be mindful of the fact that the economy is outstanding right now compared to where, things used to be and where things could be
Yes.
in, economies are often cyclical, and, these times won't always last. So if we continue to kick things down the road, hoping that there's gonna be some magical pot of money, that may very well turn out to be not the case at all, and we may be in the good times now when we should be. So anyway, what I'm saying is, strongly suggest, stick to the capital plan that was put together for a reason, and when you inform the residents of what it is and why, I think they'll be supportive.
The issue that we're talking about tonight, though, just to be clear, is less about capital and more about operating, because capital is one-time expenditures, and operating costs, adding personnel, adding benefits, those things are with you from year to year and are built on from year to year, and they just, they inflate your base. So that's, it's something that Mr. Ballantyne and I have talked about, for several years. It's ended up in the budget book messages that I know everybody reads diligently. And I appreciate that. But it's we need to make sure that we're not going past our growth, and our ability to grow and our ability to sustain that growth. In the first 7 budgets that we did as a finance team, we added 7.5 full-time equivalent positions. In this budget, people have requested 5.5 full-time equivalent positions. There's no way we can sustain that in 1 year. There just isn't.
So, okay. And it's not gonna be every year, so, right, so police is looking for 2,
Yeah?
right? Fire is looking for
One.
One.
and a part-time,
And some
right?
additional hours for the admin,
And
yes.
youth and family services,
One.
1.
Mhm.
All right, so they're not gonna be asking for an additional one every year. I mean, so.
How many
what-
police officers have we added in the past 7 years?
I don't know, you might know
How
the
many
answer.
firefighters have we added? I'm
So-
just,
so
yeah, I'm,
If the police chief, they'll come before us.
Yeah.
And they'll let us know their thoughts. I remain committed to supporting, our police chief with his requested hires and our new fire chief who's analyzed his department and their needs, and would hope to see those in our budget.
Yeah.
I would also throw in a potentially unpopular idea, in that we do have some capacity to think about things like exclusions and overrides relative to some of the capital expenditures as another relief mechanism. I agree with
Right.
Mr. Kalenda also that if we're trying to do the right thing, I think there's a good chance that the public will support it in terms of town meeting votes. And so we can, again, think about some other ways of dealing with it potentially.
It's a
which
good
you'd
point.
prefer
I
not to
didn't bring
do.
that up, and you're right with some of the larger projects, especially something like a transfer station.
Right,
You would
yeah.
probably want to exclude something like that.
Yeah.
That's not in,
Yeah, and you don't want to do that as a matter of habit.
Correct,
On the other hand,
but-
it's another option.
but some of the
that
larger, yeah.
we and
Yes.
the public might consider to think about here, so.
So I don't know if the overall final word is to take up your suggestion and
Again, I
show a,
haven't seen in.
what can we do with
good
all
exercise.
blues?
I would
and
like
go
to
from
see it.
there.
I haven't, maybe didn't listen carefully enough on the 17th. Maybe the numbers were floating around and they just didn't, drill down into my head. But looking at the chart that you put together, I can never remember seeing a Southborough budget that extended out, that was looking at levy deficits approaching $4 million. And that is about 8% of our current budget. And heck, the supportive of whether it's public safety or otherwise, but the taxpayers of Southborough are incredibly generous. They've always been incredibly generous. But it is, I think, critical to let them know the amount of deficit that we are potentially looking at, and also to lay out exactly what is accounting for that. I thought it was, for instance, I thought it was very interesting that, one of the, canards is that schools drive an awful lot of our growth, and I thought it was interesting that that's not the case. And that the additional chart that you put out that showed that the growth in the school's budget has lagged pretty significantly behind the growth in the town's budget.
It's a little bit different from when you were on advisory.
Yes, yes.
It is a
The
little
school,
bit different.
the school has been, a great partner, in this process, and quite frankly, if they hadn't been, we would be sitting here having this discussion 3 years ago, which potentially could have impacted that new building that sits down the street right now.
Yeah, so I just don't think it's enough to say, I support, I support public safety, or I support, the building department, or I support, heck, I support all of them. I mean, I think they're all terrific, but I also support the taxpayers. And I think it's important to know exactly what is driving these numbers, so we can let the taxpayers know what's driving them, and also potentially at our level, at least in terms of recommendations, let folks know that we think there are a couple of different avenues to addressing them. So I would still like to see what a budget without any red projecting into the future would look like, and how we might accomplish that.
Agreed. I agree
Well
with that.
said.
And again, as we discuss this on the 17th, take it individually, everybody can make a strong case for why they need the additional staffing, why they need the additional help and all that. And I do appreciate the effort that you've gone through in what you've presented here, to take the 5.5 FTEs that have been proposed and scale that down. And I see part of that is reduction in your own department, where, you had made a strong case, for the need for that full person, but you've scaled that down. But I think we need to, continue to look at, where, the recommended cuts are, and just continue to have discussions with those department heads. Is that, I understand the need, is this, taken as a whole, this is the red that results from it, how can we, we don't want to be in a situation where we're adding all these people, and then we start to get to the red, and then a year from now, 2 years from now,
Right, you don't want to lose them,
we're
correct.
cutting those
Correct.
same people right out. Whatever we do needs to be sustainable, and we need to demonstrate to the people, we need to do this projection to show, how sustainable it is, so.
So one final comment is just timeline. So as we sit here now, it is January 7th, town meeting is March 28th. We are, the hopeful scenario is that we are posting our final warrant, signed warrant, or signing that final warrant at the second meeting in February, which I believe is the 18th. If not, we could do a special meeting closer to the end of the month, possibly. I would hate to go to the beginning of March. That means we've got about 6 weeks to get down to a budget that this board is willing to support. One of the things, to Mr. Calendar's point, the budgets have always not been a hot topic, I guess, at town meeting. They've always done very well, and, in terms of people understand them, and I think that, me personally, as well as the team, take great pride in that. So we try to make sure that the budgets are as collaborative as possible, and that, we do the kumbaya as much as we can to get everyone on the same page going into the meeting. That's going to be, we need to factor that in too, assuming that there may be differences that we want to try to resolve prior to town meeting, prior to that final budget being put together. So again, I just mentioned timeline just to keep everybody, they think March is a ways away, and we just have some things that we need to get together in the next, in the next 5 to 6 weeks.
Is there a target date to sit down with advisory for the joint, used to be headbutting, now
yeah.
kumbaya moment?
So we had Mr. Ballantyne and I had a conversation with Ms. Cook this afternoon, and it's been a weird budget season simply because advisory has been scheduling their meetings. I'm told unintentionally, doesn't have anything to do with us, but they're doing them on selectmen meeting nights. So we have not been able to be at very many meetings. I'm not sure Brian has been able to be at one yet. I've been to one. and we're both going next week to have those conversations. What we talked about is that we are going to speak again tomorrow and say, here's where the selectmen are, here's what the selectmen are looking to do. Where is advisory on this? And just to start that conversation of how are we going to put together kind of a roadmap to get together and try and talk about where everybody is and how we're going to get to a collaborative position.
So advisory's meeting next Tuesday night?
Yeah, they
Correct.
met, yeah, they met
Yes.
tonight, they're meeting next Tuesday as well.
Yes, Ms. Cook suggested, I think, meeting next week to try to hammer out maybe some scheduling that the town administrator could suggest to the board, to get
Yeah.
this wrapped up.
So if the selectmen, if, we can have a conversation, I can always send out a scheduling email to see, maybe it makes sense for the board to come to the advisory meeting next week and jointly maybe have those conversations or begin those conversations.
Okay.
So,
At least be a fly on the wall.
yes.
Yes.
When is school vacation week? Anyone
School
know?
vacation week is the week of the week of the 21st.
21st, okay.
Yep.
So the 18th
Yes.
would be fine then?
Is
On
February, that's,
18th, I think it'd be in the middle of
18th is-
vacation week.
yeah,
Oh, then that is a problem.
18th is February. February 21st, our next meeting
Oh, you said the
is
18th.
vacation week.
Oh, that's a problem. That's a problem.
No,
that's
but he
what I'm
said the
saying.
18th, that's why I was clarifying. Yeah.
No, it's the 18th of February, right?
So-
He said,
Yeah,
I
so-
asked, when is vacation week? You said the week of the 21st.
That's correct.
That's,
And if that's the
well,
case,
the 21st is a Friday, so so starting Monday, it's the week of the 17th. 17th is a holiday.
okay, so that's different. That's a problem if we have the meeting during the school vacation week, I think.
We could try and plan to meet 4th and the 11th to get our two February meetings done.
Might be better if you do 11 and 25. The reason I suggest that is because that, then we could plan to sign the final warrant, the final version of the warrant on the 25th. If you do the 4th and the 11th, I doubt we're gonna be ready to have that warrant ready for signature on the 11th. I'll be seeking a special meeting somewhere, so.
Yep.
So pick your poison with the 4th or the 11th, but then the 25th. So you could go 2nd and 4th in February if that works better and that avoids vacation.
11 and 25.
11:25 work? All right, that's a good suggestion.
Okay.
Suggest we do that. Yeah. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Brian, just the roster of capital things, is that something you can send out relatively quickly?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks.
Excuse me, next, town administrators report. Couple things. First, office hours. We have put a request out to to check availability for folks. Now, with the discussion that we just had, I think that's gonna impact the dates that we had originally targeted for office hours. So my plan was to have them starting next Tuesday on the 14th and the 28th of January. If we're gonna meet on the 11th and 25th and recognizing the 18th as vacation week, do we just wanna hold them on the 4th on February? Do we wanna skip February? Do we wanna try and do it on the week of school vacation? So we'll have board meetings on the 7th and 21st of January. I was thinking 14th, 28th for office hours. Then the 4th would be that next Tuesday.
I mean, I can do school vacation week,
I can do it also.
I could as
here.
well. I could as well. All right, so why don't we, for office hours, 14th, 28th of January, 18th of February? and then 10th, 24th of March.
When is town meeting? 28th?
March 28th.
I guess we can do it the 24th. I don't know, I'd rather keep that date free.
We'll just do it the 10th in March?
Yeah, I think that'd be
All right.
my inclination.
All right, so 14th, 28th of January, February 18th, and March 10th. So those will be office hours dates. Again, based on attendance and how things went, I'd propose 5 to 6:30 for a time. Obviously, if people are here at 6:30, there's nothing preventing us from going later, but if it's quiet and people want to bug out a little bit early, we can end it at 6:30 if no one else is coming. All right, so, and if you could follow up with, Carol, right, is the one who would, or, all right, so if we could follow up with Vanessa on, all right, and so if you could just get replies to Vanessa on availability to help out with office hours for those night.
And I think you heard Sam and Marty for school vacation week, so you just put them in automatically.
Older kids.
Yeah. Next, for our next meeting on January 21st, we do need to start filling in the gaps that exist on the town meeting warrant. One of those is finalizing the language for the accessibility committee, the proposed accessibility committee. So I would request that board members, if you do have comments on that, the latest version that we discussed a few meetings ago, if we could get comments back into Mark on, say, close of business next week on Wednesday,
Okay.
so that you could then have time to compile comments that you receive and have a version that we could include in the packet
For the
our meeting
21st.
on the 21st, so
Sure.
we can discuss board members' suggested comments, if there are any, on the accessibility committee, so we can start to work towards finalizing the wording for that article.
So with regards to the warrant articles, I have sent out to those departments who have submitted articles, just to get me draft wording or suggested wording as soon as possible, so I can get town council moving on some of those things. So we do have that in process. I have asked for that wording, at least in draft form, to be to me by Friday. So I'm hoping by early next week I can have Aldo taking a first blush at some of the articles.
Next I had, so Mr. Kalenda, you had sent me a note a couple weeks ago now with what I thought was a great suggestion for a way to.
Better listen in.
That was a great suggestion. It wasn't in mine, right?
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, as a way to honor and recognize Mr. Schifrin, our
Yes.
former colleague. And I think that is, I don't know if you want to, it was your idea, or if you want to expand on that, and I think
So,
it's something that we should continue to
You know,
explore.
I think Brian was, you know, an amazing guy all around, and dedicated so much of his own personal time to the benefit of this town. He was involved in so many parts of this town, and I tell you, he was thrilled when he became a member of the Board of Selectmen. I know that's a goal that he had. He, you know, I mentioned it during one meeting. We had again, Ms. Braccio, who had to leave. She hasn't been feeling well, but, you know, she puts together a lot of things, right, in a lot of ways for people to get together. She put together a thank you breakfast for Bonnie and Brian when they were leaving the Board of Selectmen. And I mentioned during that time that, you know, that you want to see a profile in courage, you need to look no further than Brian Schifrin and his family and what they have all gone through. So, you know, with everything that Brian has done for this town, I'd love to see us be able to honor him. I know that he did a lot with and enjoyed the great game of softball as well, and which is, you know, done over at Woodward. I had an idea, just one of what could be many, but one idea is to, you know, name that the Brian Schifrin Athletic Complex or something like that. You know, again, maybe other ideas that folks have, but I wanted to at least start that conversation of ways that we could honor the memory of our colleague, Brian.
So I think that's a great idea, and I think that, so obviously, Choate Field already,
Right.
has some,
Which would stay.
exactly,
Yep.
exactly. But I think it's definitely worthwhile starting that conversation, and, my sense is that there would be support for, for all involved for that, so.
I think if you name the softball diamond, the Brian Schiffern Memorial, softball, softball
or
field
diamond
at
it.
Choate Field, or softball
Yeah.
diamond at Choate Field.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think it'd be good to get the approval of the Choate trustees as
Sure.
well for something like that, if the board wanted to move forward, and if you're looking to go in that direction, I'd be happy to explore that with the trustees, to get their approval. I'm sure that would not be very difficult. But that's something I think we should.
I'd like to know, if the family would be supportive of this, obviously, first, but I wanted to at least have that discussion, at one of our meetings about ways to honor Brian. I think that would be kind of a neat way, because I know he enjoyed, spending time there and playing the sport, and so
So,
Yeah, Schiffer
Great.
Field's got a nice ring to it.
it does.
So, again, great suggestion. And lastly, I just wanted to pass along condolences to the family of John Bartolini, World War II vet, but also a 23-year veteran and member of our Board of Health here in town as well. Gentleman who served this town very well, and pass along our thoughts to the Bartolini family. And that's all I had. Others?
No report here.
Done.
I've got a couple of comments, please.
Yep.
Last evening, the planning board approved the site plan for the proposed St. Mark's dormitory on School Street that's been in process for a while here. Just wanted to point out, I see this as a great example of collaboration between institutions and boards in town. Planning board, I think, did a great job of working with St. Mark's to get a good project, and both St. Mark's team and the planning board appear to be very pleased with the process and the result. And I actually heard similar comments from various St. Mark's staffers at an event I attended last month with St. Mark's people. And I was particularly interested in the fact that St. Mark's team specifically commented on the value of their collaboration with our Open Space Preservation Commission with the landscaping project. And they came up with some ideas that they described last evening as very forward-thinking, and everybody seemed very pleased with that. So I think that's a good example, again, of our working together. Second point is that, as folks may know, I'm a member of the Public Works Planning Board, and there's going to be a meeting later this month, the date not fully certain yet, the Public Works Planning Board, but an item on that agenda is discussion of a complete streets policy that allows for a more comprehensive look at how we develop transportation infrastructure to support all users of roadways, trails, and transit systems, including pedestrians, bicyclists, motorists, commercial vehicles, emergency vehicles, et cetera. And I think that it's going to be an interesting conversation to figure out what the wording on that's going to be. I think the first discussion will be at that meeting, and I would urge people who are interested in that to watch the meeting schedule, and if they have thoughts and comments, to attend that and weigh in on it. I expect that the draft policy will be posted before that meeting occurs. I'll request that that be done. And again, that will come to the Board of Selectmen eventually for review and approval, potentially. But I think it's an important step forward to open the door for grant funds for transportation development. And I hear a lot of people talking about the need for sidewalks, for example, and that's part of this discussion. So again, would urge people with thoughts on that to keep an eye on it and chime in as appropriate. Thank you.
So hopefully that doesn't conflict with the comments we had earlier about wanting to keep trees, though.
Yes,
So
well,
it's a whole huge balancing
That's
act.
correct.
So, consent agenda, any items that members want to hold? Oh, I'm sorry, town administrator's report.
Well, you said town administrator's report, and then you dug right in, so I
So-
just,
Sorry, I thought you were done.
I didn't know what to think. So, no, I wanted to make sure I got a chance to give my report while Mr. Laflamme and Mr. Ballantyne was still here. I do want to recognize Brian once and Tom twice. for 2 grants that the town recently received, which I notified the board about. One of them, the second one, just came, speaking with Representative Dykema yesterday. The first one was about $17,000 Community Compact Award from the state for some new budgeting software. We had been talking about doing, in fact, it did show up as a $17,000 line item in the budget. If you were watching carefully, it's no longer there. And that's because through the work of Mr. Laflamme and Mr. Ballantyne, we were able to put forth a proposal for this budgeting software. It's going to help us in terms of transparency. It's going to help us in terms of efficiency. And I think it's going to make a much better and easier process. So some of the questions that are coming up tonight as to, looking at particular things and understanding the history and how we got to where we are will be able to be done, on your own time. For looking at that, you're still going to ask us. We still can get the answers for you. But you'll be able to see a lot of those things, and that transparency will exist with the committees and the boards, and to make things process a little bit easier for advisory and for the Board of Selectmen as well. The second one that we just received notification on, and huge kudos to Tom for this, is approximately an $81,000 IT grant from the state. One of the things we've tried to do is extend and expand, let's say implement, extend, expand the town's fiber network. When Tom and I sat down originally, this was a 3 to 4 year proposal to try to get this to all our buildings. With this $81,000, we are going to connect the remaining town buildings, DPW, cemetery buildings, and the Arts Center, so that within about an 18-month period, our fiber network extends now to all of our town buildings. And I just want to recognize Tom for the work he's done. One of the best decisions I think we made is bringing our IT in-house with an employee, and it's paid off tremendously. And again, the work that Brian, helped to do on, fine-tuning, Tom's application, everything, tremendous. So I really just want to give them kudos for what they've done, and it's really been, it's going to pay off, and it is paying dividends. Again, these are things you don't see in the budget.
Mark, does that get fiber to our communications systems as well in terms of the?
Yeah, those are all done.
All done?
Yeah, so
Great.
Sam, this is, like I said, this was a longer-term plan, and we have been able to reallocate resources and, again, make the case in the grant application that we've put all of this into it. This is what we need from you to help us finish it.
Great.
And it was, just tremendous. So I'm very pleased, and again, we don't always get to give you good news. Happy to give you good
Excellent.
news.
Thank you.
Sometimes one can have too much fiber, but not in this case.
Yes, exactly.
Very well, Tom, you have hit the
Exactly.
ground running from the moment you arrived here, and we are, that was a wise hire on our part, and we're glad you're with us. You continue to make great progress for the town and do it in a very cost-effective way. This grant is another wonderful example. Thank you.
Kudos, gentlemen.
So one more money piece, good news. The state has recently decided that they're all done playing around with fiscal 19, which we closed 7 months ago, but just over 6 months ago. And so they finally, they added an additional $20 million to the Chapter 90 appropriations. And so our new apportionment for Chapter 90 for this fiscal year is $478,000, which is about $43,500 more than it was intended to be. So the governor put a little bit more money into Chapter 90, and so that money, that just enhances what we have available to us for our roads and transportation improvement. And I know that some of that money is being applied, with regards to our portions with the Main Street improvements. I received a letter, yesterday from Attorney Robert Cohen, addressed to the board. Mr. Cohen's office is representing abutters and landowners in Southborough and Framingham who are challenging in court the city of Framingham's decision to site a marijuana cultivation processing facility on Edmonds Road in Framingham. He is requesting two things. One, if the board has a position on this project, and further, if the town of Southborough would be willing to join the litigation as a friend of the court in opposition to the proposed development. So I do not believe the board has ever discussed this in taking a position. I'm not sure the board's interest in getting involved in someone else's politics, but I bring it to you for your consideration. If you'd like, I can always could put it on the agenda for further discussion, or...
It does bring back memories of where we've been asked in the past by others to offer an opinion on a matter outside of the town of Southborough. Our practice then has been, we do not, but of course, this board can do whatever it wants. I would personally have no interest in offering an opinion on another town's business at this point.
Does the letter say, Mark, that he represents people, residents of both Framingham and Southborough?
Abutters to and other landowners in the town of Southborough and the city of Framingham.
I guess I'd at least want to know what the, I have no idea where this location is. I guess I'd at least want to hear what our Southborough abutters' interest in it
This was the
might be.
Pine Hill traffic
Yeah, the Pine Hill
conversation.
traffic.
Yeah,
It's just-
Yeah, I know, but if
Yes.
it's just traffic,
Yeah.
we've already heard on the traffic, but if it's something, I mean, and if it's one Southborough person or 9, I mean, so maybe a couple of questions we could ask, Mr. Cohen, is that, you said the
Sure.
attorney's name
Yep.
was? And just find out the Southborough element of it. I guess that's something
Okay.
I'd want to know. If it's just traffic, I mean, we've already been thinking about that and addressing it. So I
Sure.
think I agree with Mr. Kalenda. But if there's some other abutter issue, I guess I'd like to hear what that
They
was.
talked about odor concerns was one of the things that they had mentioned when they were in here
Yeah.
at least. So I don't know how.
Again, I have no idea where the location is and how close it is actually to the Southborough town line or anything like
It
that.
abuts Callahan State Park.
Okay, haven't been there in a while.
It's the farm, as you go up Pine Hill, take a
Yeah.
right, the farm
Yeah.
on the right-hand side is the area.
Okay.
So just, from my perspective, just some pretty limited additional information.
And again, just from my personal perspective, not having partaken at all in any of the public meetings as part of that process, and not having seen the presentation or anything, I don't want to get involved in it. And, with all respect to all the parties involved, I'm sure there's, good side to be told on by both parties, but I personally would not want to get involved.
I'm just not sure what we could do, I guess, as part of that process. Not convinced that we could have any significant impact.
I think what they end up doing is just saying, hey, look at the town of Southborough is for us, and they add it to their list of endorsements or lack thereof. And, but unless we are really fully engaged in analyzing all the pros and cons of some other town's business, I understand the issue, and that's a good one about, are there residents of Southborough who have, feel really strongly one way or the other and want us to, offer an opinion? That'd be different, but it's still, at the end of the day, it's up to the people in the now city of Framingham to do what they feel best.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I just remember when the discussions were ongoing about the facility we have in town on
remember it
Route
well.
9. There were folks, particularly folks with young children who lived on Clifford Road and the like, and had concerns about not just that there was going to be traffic, but what the traffic was going to be and the like. And I guess I'd just like to hear what the Southborough people have to say. Again, they're looking for friends of court. I mean, that you're right. That can range from, Southborough thinks it's a great idea, to actually filing stuff and incurring expenses. Going down any of those roads doesn't sound like a good idea, but I think it makes sense to find out what the concerns are of the Southborough residents.
So I can get that from the attorney.
And if there are demonstrable negative impacts on Southborough, that people can say, here's what the data says, and here's what it means to us in whatever significant way, that'd be interesting to understand.
Once again, I agree with Mr. Stavros.
Red letter night.
And finally, the last item, I've been having some correspondence, as well as Ms. Hale, with a town resident, Karen Wheeler, who lives on Darlene Drive. I think I had forwarded the board an email from her. She's interested in trying to resurrect Green Technology Committee 2.0. She, in her email, she works for Second Nature Incorporated, which is a Boston nonprofit that works with higher education to accelerate climate action. And she's looking at some of the things that the town had done with the Green Technology Committee back in the day. She's spoken with Carl Geyer. And again, if you recall, once we got green community status, that community kind of petered out, and there really was nobody to pick up the to take the lead on that, so to speak. She is citing that several towns have energy and sustainability committees that look at actively supporting the lowering of energy consumption, reduction of carbon emissions, saving the town money, and she's interested in seeing if in helping to champion this if the board is interested in reconstituting this committee, and if that's the case, then I can work with her to try to look at what some of these other cities and towns are doing and try to put together a charge and see if the board would be amenable to moving that forward. But I didn't want to do a whole lot of work if the board was not interested in revitalizing that effort.
I think it's worth pursuing.
Consideration, okay.
And you might
It's a good idea.
suggest, go ahead, Scarlett, all right.
No, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I do too, but to me, the challenge is, good idea, I certainly support the concept, but we obviously have trouble finding volunteers for a variety of committees, so if she is eager to do that, if she could actually figure out, are there other people out there, and maybe generate a list of candidates for the committee, that would be even more helpful.
I think that, yeah, that's the challenge for anything, for existing committees, never mind new ones, so, okay.
Right.
Yeah, I actually will be surprised if there's not a lot of interest in a committee like that.
Okay.
Yeah, but maybe my reading of tea leaves is off, as it often is.
Green
But-
tea leaves?
All done.
That's it.
Mr. Shea?
Yes.
I forgot one thing, may I add one small point?
Yes.
Transportation, I mentioned with the complete streets thing. One transportation item of interest, the Master Plan Committee is meeting this coming Wednesday evening, and Senator Eldridge and Representative Dykma are going to be there to talk about transportation in terms of state initiatives relative to transportation issues in Southborough. A lot of work on Mass Pike and interchange with 495, and some plans out there for Route 9, 495 interchange. And they hopefully will be able to shed some light on some of the things that are going on there as the Master Plan Committee looks at that. So if folks are interested in that, opportunity to get an up-to-date conversation with folks who are in the legislature and are positioned to know more about what's happening. So, or encourage people to watch the agenda for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Move on to consent agenda. Are there any items folks would like to hold?
Nope.
With
No,
that,
not
I
here.
will move the consent agenda as written in the agenda.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Other matters properly before the board, consideration of draft policy for small cell wireless installations, 5G. Mr. Purple.
Mr. Chairman, so you, just to provide a little bit of context on this issue, the issue of some of the small cell installations and the 5G technology was brought to our attention by a resident probably about a year or so ago. And since that time, the town, the board has agreed to engage an attorney from KP Law, Attorney Loftman, to try and work through with the town what a policy would look like to try and provide some fences, so to speak, for these applicants who come in and want to put this technology in town, and some requirements so that we're preserving and protecting the aesthetics as well as the health concerns and everything of the residents when this technology is implemented. This is still something that is very much on, we're very much on the front side of the wave. This is very beta. I've had conversations with the attorneys recently as yesterday with Ms. Hale. And, you know, they're trying to craft a document that gives the board some rules of the road, but does not trample on the FCC regulations that govern it. So when I had taken a look at what I provided to you in the packet, which essentially was the out-of-the-box proposal from the attorney, as well as a sample document from the town of Burlington, it really didn't help to give you something that you could try to sink your teeth into. So which is why late this afternoon I sent you out some additional documents which tried to make them a little easier for you to look at and use as a base document. And I understand that you, in all likelihood, have not really had a chance probably to take a look at some of these. So therefore, to try and have a substantial or substantive discussion tonight on this, you know, is probably not something that we can do. But I think the suggestion is, I do have hard copies here. You know, if the board would like to, you know, take a look at these over the, you know, between now and the next meeting, provide comments back to me. Attorney Loftman is waiting, you know, to see what the board would like to do, and questions or comments you may have on the policies, on the application process, on the design criteria, and then provide answers back. And if it looks like it's going to be a little too cumbersome, then we will simply schedule Attorney Loftman to come in and meet with the board and try and you know, work through this, you know, so that we can get to a final policy. Again, this is something that is still on the front side of the wave. Really don't know how onerous or how effective the policy will be until you actually have somebody at your door that wants to install these small cells in your community. But I think that it, you know, behooves us to be prepared. And so that is the genesis, I think, you know, and that's what, you know, the resident who had brought this forward, you know, was trying to further with the board as well.
I took a look at the original stuff you sent out, and it was kind of difficult to wind your way through it. But I tried, and did a little bit of research, and I don't think we're definitely ahead of the curve in terms of addressing this, but you know, every week there's another community in Massachusetts that is you know, got this on its front burner. And the thing that surprised me is just how little we have to say about it. You know, it's health stuff is the FCC is taken out of local control. You know, we're left with an application process and the aesthetics and construction side of things. That being said, those are potentially important issues, and I mean, I think what at least from my perspective, what makes the most sense is to have, you know, sort of a comment period, maybe put it on the agenda for the 21st. I think at least I would like at some point to have a conversation with the attorney, because just looking at her draft and Burlington's, there were some differences, and I'd just like to, you know, inquire why some things were left out, why some things were included. And I do think that Burlington did a pretty nice job and adopted a pretty good policy.
They didn't do Burlington's, so that was done by someone else. But I really think that having the experience with this type of policy and with this issue, they can probably give you at least a sense of why one and not the other. And again, you know, it's kind of an out-of-the-box approach, and then you make it Southborough, you make it Burlington, you determine what you're willing to do. Do you want to have public hearings for every issue, you know, that comes before you, every utility crossing, you know, all of these things? Do you want to do something lesser than? Do you want to do, you know, a butter notices to, you know, X distance? Do you want it to be less? Do you want it? So again, you've got to, and it's tough to figure out because
Well, our hands
you're
are ti-
talking about it in principle. You have no idea in practice. You're going to go, wow, I can't believe that we thought that would look okay.
Well, except that the FCC has said that there's an hourglass for each one of these things of 60 and 90 days, depending
Yes.
on, I mean, so there aren't going to be a lot of hearings on this.
Right.
We're going to have to set up a process that deals with it on the front end because the time limitations are so strict. But anyway, so that's, at least that's my view, having, you know, as I say, fought my way through some pretty dense material.
Yeah, and I know that, and the stuff that I read through, and particularly comments that people in town had offered, there were suggestions about, you know, setting restrictions from certain structures, and I don't know how that conflicts with.
can't do it.
with the
I don't think so,
FCC.
yeah.
You cannot do it, period. I mean, it's not,
Yep.
period. You know,
There
the FCC has basically, you know, federally preempted the health concerns, the near school concerns, near public facility concerns. They've taken control of it.
And it all comes back to, you know, we could spend hundreds of hours gathering, you know, input from residents, things that one resident wants to change, another one wants to do that. And it may very well mean nothing. You know, I mean, I want to take my advice from those who are learned in this area, who practice in this area. So, you know, what you sent to us, Mr. Purple, today was more helpful to me. At the end of the day, I'd love to see what, you know, council advises as an appropriate course of action for the town of Southborough and start from that.
And admittedly, I haven't seen what you've sent around later this afternoon, or earlier this afternoon, rather, but,
So maybe.
and again, you know, and
yeah.
part of this is we're on the front side of the wave, but then I'm watching the football games over the weekend, and T-Mobile has got the whole
Right.
country painted
Covered
pink
in
with
5G.
with all the 5G coverage,
We're-
except
we're-
for the,
We're being
Grand
irradiated right
Canyon.
now.
yeah, except for the Grand Canyon, the whole country's covered, so it's,
So maybe, given the comments tonight and from where the comments came from, maybe it would be good if the board has any particular questions or comments that they'd like to have addressed, and then I can work with the vice chair and schedule a conference call between, you know, he and myself and the attorney to try and flesh out some of those issues and things like that, and bring something back, you know, for the board to at least say, okay, you know, this is something we feel comfortable with, but let's now put it out for a comment period, and then, you know, maybe it's something that, you know, we can actually get approved in, you know, at a February meeting.
Yeah.
Happy to do it.
I offer a comment and a question, I guess. One is that I think we're better off actually getting something that's in place that I'd be happy with pretty good as opposed to perfect and waiting for a longer period of time. As this evolves, it's going to be very fluid. I think we take our best shot at it as we can reasonably with it and see if we can get something moving quickly. I've read through the stuff. I remain a little confused about some of these things, but just structurally, it seems to me, I'm trying to understand what we need in terms of documents here. It looks like that there is a policy, if you will, about what's required here that may or may not include design criteria. I like Burlington's design criteria, for example. There's an application form that we'll have to have, and then there's a license agreement with the carrier. So those were the four pieces that I saw, was the policy, the design standards, which might be rolled into the policy, application form, and license agreement. Is that the document set that we
Yes.
need to have to go
Yes.
forward with? And it'd be very helpful to have that package then at a next round, because I was getting confused in terms of how some of those pieces fit from the stuff that I saw from our attorney. So to have that package, those four parts, or if there are other parts that she thinks we need, to have all that sort of organized that way so I could figure out better how they all fit together. So that was at least my mental structure of the thing that evolved as I kept reading through the stuff.
Yeah, so that's what I had sent out, like I said, late this afternoon, was the application form, the policy, and then there is also the design criteria. So it's actually those three documents.
Okay.
And then there is,
And the license agreement
there
I
is,
saw
yes,
from
there is
somebody
there is a master license agreement,
with the carrier,
you know,
which I
that
think is
also needs to
an
be
important
included.
part of the package.
Yep, and I need to, yes, and I can do that as well.
And then finally, the fees I saw, I looked around some, and those seem to vary out there in the world. So I'd be interested in whatever the attorney can tell us about, what's the market doing in terms of the fees for these things.
Market doesn't matter, the FCC has put
It's,
a cap.
So there's a limit,
There's a
so
cap.
whatever that
Yeah.
limit is.
So that's what,
we ought to
I
charge.
believe it
Okay.
says that in the document,
Okay.
is that, your fee, you set your fee schedule not to exceed what the FCC will allow. So it allows you the maximum latitude. The reason, and I had this conversation with the town planner, is, does the planning board want to put this into a bylaw? And they came back and said, the planner had said the same thing to me that the council had said, is that we suggest that being done at a policy level with the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
Because especially, you're meeting once or twice a year for a town meeting, us once a year.
More flexible.
You want to be able to be nimble
Right.
with this policy. If something's not working, if something needs to be addressed, the board can change that, at a meeting.
Or on the other side, I understand there's a fair amount of court action against the FCC from various municipalities to try to get some more flexibility, and may
All
not go
unsuccessful.
May not go anywhere. Yeah.
I actually like they are, everybody's sued and they've all lost. But I actually like the way that the different than Burlington, the way the town's council on this structured it, where our various bylaws are referenced and incorporated into the policy, and you have to adhere to the policy, but the policy itself can be changed by the board.
Right.
I think that's a clever way to have done it.
So it just tries to give you maximum flexibility.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay. So I just put that out as a suggestion for the approach, is that, if the board is okay with that
Again,
approach?
I'm happy to do it.
Sounds good.
All right, so if you want to forward, maybe by the end of the week, any questions and everything that you have, then I can, to me, then I can set up a time with Mr. Healy and with the attorney, just to, get a little more learned on some of these things, and then bring back, a more refined approach, a more refined policy documents for the next meeting.
And I promise not to propose that we join any of the existing lawsuits.
Good. Not as friends of the court or whatever.
All right, anything else on 5G? All right, the board will be entering into executive session per MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21, Exemption 2, to prepare for negotiations with the police chief on a successor employment agreement. The board will not be returning to open session at the conclusion of executive session. Shea, aye.
Healy, aye.
Linda, aye.
Stivers, aye.